With the New York Jets hiring Aaron Glenn as their next head coach, there's going to be a lot of emphasis on the fact that he's a first-time head coach from the defensive side of the ball. And even though Aaron Glenn considers himself a leader of men that understands the offensive side of the ball, there's going to be a lot of pressure and a lot of focus driven onto his coordinators and try to figure out how he's going to surround himself with talent and grow this coaching staff and whatnot. We've seen a few names dropped. Jordan Schultz dropped a list of a few potential options, as well as Nick Callie's name being floated. So I want to kind of go through the resumes of all these guys and give you my thoughts and sort of freshen myself up on it, because I recognize like half the names, and then some of the other names that were kind of new to me. So let's go through this. First name up on the list, potential defensive coordinator Steve Wilks. Spent a lot of time in the NFL, most notably defensive coordinator or defensive backs coach, I guess, for the Carolina Panthers during the time they went to the Super Bowl with Cam Newton. He's been a coach for a very, very long time, dating back to 1995. Now this spans, I'm assuming this is college and pro, unless there's like some high school stuff in here, but Johnson C. Smith, he was the defensive coordinator 95 to 96. Savannah State defensive coordinator from 97 to 98. He then became the head coach there in 1999. 2000, he was the Illinois State defensive backs coach. Then he went to Appalachian State for a year, defensive backs coach. Then East Tennessee State for a year, defensive coordinator. Then Bowling Green for a year, defensive backs coach. Then Notre Dame for a year as the defensive backs coach. Then Washington for a year as the secondary coach. Then the Chicago Bears from 2006 to 2008. So I believe that was the year they went to the Super Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. Went against the Colts. I think that was 2006. He was defensive backs coach there. Then he went to San Diego for 2009 through 2011. So I do think he had Antonio Cromartie in that first year prior to him coming over to the Jets. Then he had his longest stint at one consistent spot, and that was the Carolina Panthers, 2012 to 2014 as the defensive backs coach, 15 and 16 as the assistant head coach and defensive backs coach, and then 2017 assistant head coach and defensive coordinator. He then became the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals in 2018. This was the guy that drafted Josh Rosen with the 10th overall pick by the Cardinals. He was fired after that year. They wound up bringing in Cliff Kingsbury, and they wound up drafting Kyler Murray just 1 year later. He became the defensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns in 2019, then Missouri defensive coordinator in 2021, Carolina Panthers defensive pass game coordinator and secondary coach for 2002, became the interim head coach in 2022, and then was defensive coordinator in 2023 for the 49ers. Then this past year was a volunteer advisor for the Charlotte 49ers. And look, I'll be honest, seeing this list of resume, it's nice seeing a lot of experience, but the concern here for me is that he's basically only had one or two stops throughout his entire career where he's been at a place for longer than like a year or two. That to me does speak volumes. It's kind of like when you look at a resume and you see like, okay, this person hops jobs every single year. How do you feel confident that he's going to be on your staff for a long time? So Steve Wilks as a defensive coordinator, he might be good. I question why he was bounced around so much over the last few years. So I would say I'm probably not super crazy keen on, but some head coaching experience, maybe a lot of experience, with a bunch of organizations and how to fail, how to have success. I don't know. Some guys are better as defensive coordinators than head coaches. So maybe this is just kind of the role he's kind of meant to have. An offensive coordinator candidate that I do really like. Green Bean brought this one to my attention prior to this list actually coming out. We had talked about it on the Talking Jets show. That's Mark Brunell. He's the quarterback coach for the Detroit Lions from 2021 to currently. And there's a lot of talks of him potentially getting the offensive coordinator role with the Lions, or maybe him following Ben Johnson to the Bears. Obviously, quarterback throughout the 90s. He started his career in Green Bay, had his most successful years with Jacksonville in the late 90s, then went over to the Redskins 2004, 2007, and then finished his career with the New York Jets, being the kind of veteran presence behind Mark Sanchez here in New York. As far as his coaching experience, Providence School assistant coach 2012, Episcopal School of Jacksonville 2013 to 2020 as the head coach, and then obviously the last few years as the quarterback's coach. Now, the thing that Green Bean really highlighted that I thought was a really good insight was that Jared Goff was kind of cast aside by the Los Angeles Rams when he got over to Detroit, and Brunell has been there ever since he got there, and Goff really has looked about as good as he's looked throughout his entire career. So do you attribute that to the knowledge that Brunell has and the leadership that he can provide? I think this is an interesting swing at offensive coordinator. There's two other names on the Detroit Lions that I would be probably more interested in. That's Scotty Montgomery, their assistant head coach, and Tanner Engstrand, their pass game coordinator. I think I'd prefer those two over Brunell, but if this was the selection for offensive coordinator, I feel like this is sort of in a similar mold, the Josh McCown experiment, without it being so recent, right? Like Josh McCown obviously is more in the limelight because of the resurgence of Sam Darnold. He was here more recently. He was a quarterback for us that started for us in 2017. So still within like the last 10 years, where Brunell was like 15 years ago. So I think, same same sort of idea of a swing that you'd go at for McCown with Brunell here. So I would be all right with them going this route if that was the decision they end up making. Special teams coordinator, they're talking about Chris Banjo. Banjo? I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that. He is the assistant special teams coach currently for the Denver Broncos for the last 2 years. So Sean Payton brought him in there. I always kind of take notice of when, really well-established coaches bring in certain players or certain guys for roles. Not to mention, this guy played for Aaron Glenn while he was on the Saints, 2016 to 2018. So there is a knowledge base for him there. So I think this would be a pretty good special teams coordinator if you wanted to bring him in, being that like he seems to be an up-and-comer, and there's ties to Aaron Glenn as well. Let's see, which one was this? This was another name that could be brought in, Thomas Brown, interim head coach for the Chicago Bears. Started his career in Georgia, strength and conditioning coach, was a running backs coach for Chattanooga for a year, for Marshall for a year, for Wisconsin for a year, for Georgia for a year. Then he went to Miami for 2016, 2018 as the offensive coordinator and running backs coach. South Carolina for a year as the running backs coach, the Rams in 2020 as the running backs coach. Then he got promoted to assistant head coach and running backs coach. And then in 2022 was the assistant head coach and tight ends coach before moving on as the offensive coordinator for a season in Carolina in 2023. I believe that was the Josh McCown year, if I'm not mistaken. And then Chicago Bears pass game coordinator this year, became offensive coordinator, and then ultimately interim head coach. So at least you could see like a pretty good growth going from school to school and then rising up through the ranks with the Rams. I think this is at least an experienced offensive play caller, both at the collegiate level and at the pro level. So an interesting option. Again, probably not crazy high on my list. I might honestly, I don't know. I guess this would be the experienced play caller recently that has gone up the list that might have a little bit more experience than, say, like a Mark Brunell. The other name that's been thrown around for offensive coordinator is Todd Haley. We know him, obviously, scouting assistant with the New York Jets, 95 to 96. There were some thoughts that maybe he'd become the Jets head coach. I think it was when we were hiring Todd Bowles, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's when his name kind of got thrown around. Wide receiver coach for the Jets, 97 to 2000. Chicago Bears wide receiver coach, 2001, 2003. Dallas Cowboys wide receivers coach. Then he was the Arizona Cardinals offensive coordinator, 2007 and 2008. I think, was that the year they went to the Super Bowl? I don't remember. My years are all getting kind of jacked up here. Kansas City Chiefs head coach, 2009 to 2011. Pittsburgh Steelers offensive coordinator, 2012 to 2017. Cleveland Browns offensive coordinator for a year in 2018. Then he took 2 years off, became the offensive coordinator for Riverview High School, 2020 to 2021. He was the Tampa Bay Bandits head coach for a year in 2022, and then the Memphis Showboats head coach in 2023. So this guy's been out of the NFL now since 2018. So it's 6 years. As much as the name is intriguing, I don't think this is a route I would prefer the Jets go, unless he's like some sort of like advisory role in some capacity. So not really where I'd like to see. A name thrown out for special teams coordinator that obviously Jet fans are near and dear to. Mike Westhoff would be a lot of fun to get him back, but I'm pretty sure he stepped away. Was it this year or last year? Due to health concerns. So I feel like more than likely he's probably just going to stay retired, but I guess a name to kind of keep an eye on. And then the name that's really been thrown around a little bit, I saw Josina Anderson talking about it. I think Connor Hughes also talked about it, is Nick Caley. The Jets interviewed him for the offensive coordinator position back after we fired Mike LaFleur. So this was prior to the Nathaniel Hackett and that whole situation with him. Spent a lot of his career with the New England Patriots, basically from 2015 to 2022 as the offensive assistant / tight ends coach and fullbacks coach. He then went over to the Rams to learn under McVay for the last 2 years. Tight ends coach in 2023, and then tight ends coach and pass game coordinator for 2024. This would be the first time at any level that he would be calling plays. So I guess you're kind of banking on the fact that he's a bright young mind and, an up-and-comer that could handle that responsibility. One thing that I've always heard the coordinator or coaching mentality sort of compared against is like the TA of a college class versus the professor of a college class. The TA might know how to do a bunch of the work and do all the research and everything, but when it's time to get in front of the class and actually teach the material and maybe hand down different disciplines, it is an entirely different ball game. So I do question that a little bit with Caley and the resume. I don't really, the New England Patriots had success at tight end, obviously, Rob Gronkowski and whatnot, but like how much of that was just God-given gifts by Gronkowski versus, how much Nick Caley actually provided in coaching. Pass game coordinator this year, I think, is at least the step just before becoming an offensive coordinator. So, learning under McVay is probably not a bad thing. But I would say of this list, I'm not overly enthusiastic just yet. I think the special teams coordinator in Chris Banjo is an interesting one, and Mark Brunell is probably the most appealing swing of this list that I think I would take a gamble on. Caley would probably be second on that list. I don't really want to touch Todd Haley. So guys, let me know your thoughts on this current list so far. Hopefully we get to see some more names kind of come out over the next few days, maybe some interviews, things of that nature. They've actually already updated, or someone updated Steve Wilks' Wikipedia page as New York Jets defensive coordinator. It is highlighted in kind of red, which I've actually never seen before, but maybe I've just never popped onto someone's page quite so quickly. So I guess let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think of these names? And is there one that you would prefer over another for a particular position? Let me know in the comment section down below. And as always, go Jets.